Hi everybody, I want to welcome you all to another Fluid webinar event series event. Today's topic is From Handheld to Handshake, how to get the most out of your mobile marketing strategy. We're pretty excited about this, especially with April having been a pretty big month for mobile. And we'd like to explain to you a little of the ins and outs of mobile and how you can do a little bit better job tracking those phone calls that come from the mobile call to actions that you all might be using. So we'll just get started. I'd like to just introduce you to our team. My name is Dustin Cederholm, and I'm the Digital Conversion Manager here at Fluid. Also on the line is Phil Case, Managing Director and Partner of Fluid. And we also have McKay Allen, Director of Content and Communication at LogMyCalls. McKay, we really appreciate having you on today. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll go ahead and just jump into our first slide then. And so you know we can be found at #Fluid Webinar Series. Use the hashtag on Twitter. And you can also find both of our companies on Twitter at GetFluid and at LogMyCalls respectively. Feel free to use those throughout the webinar if you hear anything, or ask us questions and we'll be happy to respond. So just briefly, we want to go over the state of mobile marketing, where we're at and where it's come since it kind of became so popular and really has blown up over the past few years. It's kind of been a changing of the guard. A lot of us younger folks remember when we got our first computers. Some of you guys remember not having computers and not having the internet at all. And back then, desktop really kind of ruled everything. They used to be big and bulky. They got more and more streamlined. And now we see that they've gotten so small that they're fitting in the palm of our hand. And as phones have really been improved and the technology has caught up to the ability that desktop has had, people are turning to mobile more and more frequently. Some interesting statistics here is a quote from Russell Glass, head of B2B products at LinkedIn, who believes for the first time in 2015, 50% of marketing content will be consumed on mobile or tablet device. That's just incredible and unheard of, and it's amazing we've come so far so fast. And it really speaks to marketers that we need to have our mobile dialed in, or else we're missing a lot of the market and we're going to be left behind. Another really interesting quote that I found is, in 2015, marketers will find out calls are the new clicks. I think we all know that, and as we use our own phones, we notice that we're making a lot more calls. The issue there is just how do you track that? And so marketers will be investing in call tracking to make sure that they are able to find the ROI in their marketing activities that sometimes gets lost from the ability of tracking, you know, a mobile click and some of that technology. And so it's really great to have McKay on the line, and he's going to help us bridge that gap today. I want to just briefly go over some of the major updates. April saw a lot of excitement in the mobile world, and we want to just briefly discuss some of the goings-on there.
You know, what's interesting with some of these updates that Google has done in their algorithm, you know, I've had more and more, you know, presidents and owners and CEO of companies care about mobile than ever before because of what they're hearing, both as we're informing them and as there's some disruption in the industries as it relates to marketing. But I had several that, you know, early in the month of, you know, April or even the end of March would call or email me and say, what is this about mobile that's happening with Google? Can you tell me about it? And so I think it is one of the bigger upsets, just because people are finally not so much being forced, but pretty much from Google along those lines as to where people do need to be. And, you know, as Google's kind of taken a stance in the importance of mobile and marketing, you know, those kind of laggers and late adopters are now kind of quickly coming into alignment, and just interesting to kind of see the mega trend that I think marketers have been preaching for so long, but now, you know, even business owners and others that are outside of marketing are seeing, you know, not only just the writing on the wall, but a clear declaration of where they need to be. But a couple of three things we want to hit on in regards to some of the major updates is the Google mobile friendly tag, the Google algorithm update as it relates to mobile, and then as well as the URL display change. So we're going to hit on those here just briefly in a couple of slides. This next slide on the mobile friendly tag, you'll notice this is becoming even more prominent. It's interesting as a consumer of information, as I so often use my mobile device on the go and quickly looking up things as my phone's most accessible, of how this even influences my behavior. Google tags a site as mobile friendly, and it just, as a user, makes you want to visit that site knowing that you're probably going to have a better experience. And not only is there ranking factors consideration for those sites that are mobile friendly, but it's just interesting how even perceptions are beginning to change as Google has elevated this. So that's an important thing to know. And there's some tests that we can send out after this webinar in regards to checking how mobile friendly your site is and how to kind of have Google stamp of approval to be willing to kind of display this tag in the search engines, and some things that would need to be done there. Next, as far as the algorithm update, Armageddon, kind of that has been joked around with Mobilegeddon. And this apocalypse has been a little bit overhyped potentially, and not all of the effects will be seen immediately, but this major algorithm update we had last week, we did an audit on all of our clients' websites. We tried to make sure, coaxing as much as we were able, that all were in alignment and, in a good place before the update hit. But we will see, I think, in perpetuity over the next several weeks and months, this even come to fruition more so as sites are recrawled by Google, as Google has kind of reset the playing field a little bit over the next couple of weeks. Being mobile friendly, and having that test, that you're able to pass, it will avoid a lot of large-scale issues. And one interesting fact is that of the top most popular government sites, 6 out of 10 only passed Google's mobile-friendly test, and not even IRS.gov was able to pass it. And so, there's a lot of web properties that are going to need to be brought in alignment here, and begin to recognize that in the past of, hey, that's a nice to have, quickly because of Google kind of forcing their hand, it's going to be a little bit more of a must-have.
And if you guys have other questions about how the Google algorithm works and exactly what Google changed, feel free to go to getfluid.com/blog, and we have an entire series about the algorithm update and a number of other mobile topics that I think you'll find interesting, and we kind of expand about what we are talking about here. So that's a resource if you'd like more information.
And then lastly, just while we're on this, before we get into strategies of just how they begin to display URLs even differently. And it's just, you'll notice that your browsers more than ever, before it was a CNN.com/news/politics/ and you would look at your browser and could see that full URL structure, but Google's begun and the other browsers to simplify that. And you'll notice here, as some of this display URL, or some of these URL display changes have made effect, just some of the differences you're noticing here, just how more of recognizing the brand in the site offering that content, and then kind of what that hierarchy looks like in regards to kind of, parent pages and where the content's actually housed. But just interesting how Google is even simplifying that and putting more prominence on the content itself versus where it's actually located on the page. Any other thoughts on that, Dustin, before we talk some specific mobile marketing strategies?
Just specifically on the URL, it really identifies a shift in SEO. Google is making a concerted effort to make sure that quality content is what is being found. And so some of the old tricks of putting the title in the domain are really changing, and Google wants people to see the breadcrumb and validate the site and make sure that the content you're going to is really what you're looking for. And so as marketers and look at their SEO strategy, this is a really major point that we need to just be making great content that people are going to engage with, share on social, and use to send to their peers. And that's really going to be the difference maker, whereas before, keyword stuffing and some of the old SEO tactics are kind of being phased out.
Oh, thank you. So we want to talk some specifics. As you begin to consider mobile, it's interesting. We've kind of done several meetings of the minds as we talk about our clients and their websites and kind of some of that go-to-mobile marketing strategies. Sometimes people think, well, if my website's mobile-friendly or if it's responsive and it scales appropriately to the device, phone, or tablet that individual is using, I'm good to go. And we have to think much I think much beyond that and really think about mobile audience personas and how that is different than a consumer of information on a desktop or even a tablet. And I think that based on your audience, whether it's a B2B type play and the businessman or woman versus a consumer at large that, they might during the day from a desktop computer at work be consuming information, but then when they're on the go, going to and from work, or if they're stay-at-home moms or, at bedtime, I think especially, as people do a lot of reading and answering or being able to at least review emails and social interactions, knowing that a majority of that now is happening from a mobile device, it's really outlining that strategy. And I think that most good marketers have target audience profiles and kind of buyer and brand personas. But now I think you almost have to put a layer on top of that to say, now, what is the consideration for mobile? How do we interact with this persona from a mobile device, and how does that change the playing field a little bit? And a lot of it has to do with content. I think that we've seen a large trend, of course, and shift to, if you're on a mobile device, the site responds, and you typically will get the same amount of content in the same order and, kind of ranking in your face. And the companies we've seen do it right will present a website from desktop to mobile, but on mobile they simplify the content even more, so the call to actions are different. As McKay will talk about, they're more potentially call driven, and the click the call type button. And so you'll find that not only that mobile CTAs are changing, but especially the content itself, and considering apps, social media, and other forms of just how do we facilitate a overall better user experience and understanding the way they like to consume information now with mobile, and then ultimately begin to interact. And so I think that's a pretty key thing for marketers to do, is really be defining right now the personas you've already developed, but kind of with an additional edge of mobile.
I would completely agree, and I think it really just, all these things come together in such a unique way for mobile. It's a really different way of thinking about things, where we used to be so stationary and everybody had the same experience. Now people are moving around, they're on tablets, they're on phones, they're on all different types of devices and sizes. And so simplifying that design is critical for a good mobile experience. And then, as Phil was mentioning, just the call to actions that are being used are changing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But in general, I think designing for mobile is kind of a twofold process. And the first is that you can do an entire mobile design, and you can make that separate of your site, or you can use responsive design that offers you the ability to maintain the layout that you have, but just deliver the content in a little bit different format when it scales down into the desktop. I find it interesting. I do a lot of A/B testing of sites, and with the technology that we use, we're actually able to target mobile users specifically, and we can serve different layouts to those people without having to do an entire dev on the site. And it's just incredible how we can increase the click-throughs and the call to action engagement that users take just by removing some of the common navigation that you see on a website, or removing some of the images or scaling them down, making the page load faster. All of those things are so critical when you talk about lead generation, and making sure that is specific to the mobile device is something that all marketers need to be paying attention to. I think this quote here from Mel Carson, the founder of Delightful Communications, "The future of digital lies in companies being social and mobile by design." We just cannot escape the social conversation. We can't escape the mobile conversation. And if we are not focused on those areas, we're really missing out on a huge market and really where our audience is hanging out. And so I think this is a conversation companies should be having internally, and they should discuss what is the strategy to make these devices a priority for us, where people have been so focused on just getting a good website up. And there are some simple ways to do it, and we can kind of explain further about that. If you have any questions, please email me. You can email me at dustin@getfluid.com, and we'd be happy to kind of just discuss how you should approach those conversations with your companies.
And what you'll find as well is that as we begin a design of a website or even just content in general now, the question is, first and foremost, how can we design this content in such a way that it's digestible and can be consumed easily on mobile and is shareable? And then we consider desktop, but starting with the mobile first type approach, not only in just design of a website and development, but really in the curation of content, and then ultimately the distribution and marketing of that content is pretty critical to the conversation. And speaking of which, that really kind of, I think, spills over well to some of the mobile call to action, that users are interacting much differently now. And, as we consider conversions, we found that in a lot of our testing, the data has shown that how people are engaging and ultimately, buying on a shopping cart, becoming a new lead of a B2B type channel or of a service at occurring, in a slightly different way than desktop. And so some things that we'll talk about: push-to-call capability and dynamic call tracking, the ability to download an app, to be pushing individuals to interact with the brand further and have a little bit of a deeper experience and commitment, various learn more links, but being able to do it in a way where there's just enough content on mobile to not overwhelm them, but allowing the user to kind of choose the path that they want to be directed through, and kind of stair-stepping that into quality content. Of course, that's mobile specific. We continue to see advertisers advertise on mobile type platforms or have ads appearing in a variety of channels, but even with users that are interacting and seeing those mobile ads, they'll click through the landing pages, and the content behind those won't be mobile not only friendly or optimized, but the content isn't as relevant. So it's important that there's kind of a seamless experience that as we consider mobile, from ads placed on kind of mobile devices all the way through that buyer experience, that there's consideration throughout.
Absolutely. And the last is kind of the mobile analytics and tracking. I think it's really important that people get familiar with Google Analytics and its ability to show companies how users are engaging with their site on mobile. You can actually just go see pretty quickly how many people are visiting the site via mobile versus a desktop. And if you are seeing a larger number of people visiting from a desktop, that just means how important responsive design and designing for mobile really is, and how important getting the right call to actions on your pages becomes, because users are coming in through that direction and they need to be pointed the right way. And so simply looking at Google Analytics is one way. I think one of the reasons we want to have McKay here today is the analytics and tracking of phone calls is just so hard. It's something that a lot of marketers struggle with, and it means a lot of the ROI of your marketing is slipping through your fingers. And that can be so frustrating for a marketing manager who has to discuss with their budget teams and the executives as to why they should get more funding. And so if we can close that gap, it makes it just such an easier conversation and ultimately earns you a lot more budget for you to go and do the marketing activities that are so important to your companies. And so I think this is just a great section, and again, we're happy to have McKay here who can kind of help us close the call gap from when somebody actually hits that call now button and then gets a salesperson on the other end, and how that actually tracks all the way through to seeing if a sale was made and what the numbers actually look like.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. It is a big deal, especially with mobile search really taking the reins in the entire search world, according to Google. So thanks, Phil, and thanks, Dustin, for having me, first of all. So let's just jump right into the call section of this webinar. I'll be brief and make sure that we have time if there's any questions as well. So we do feel like mobile's missing link that a lot of people haven't been tracking effectively are phone calls. So do calls matter? That's the first question. Well, here's some data points that hopefully indicate that the answer is yes. Number one, mobile search has surpassed desktop search in terms of frequency. So someone is more likely to interact with your company on a smartphone or a tablet than they are sitting at their desk or on their laptop at home in the evening. They're more likely to interact with your site and with your landing pages on a smartphone than any other device. So that changes the game right there immediately. That changes their entire focus, their entire goal, and really what you're trying to get them to do. Now, because of mobile search and now the prevalence of mobile search, Google says that nearly 70% of mobile local searches result in a phone call. So if you are, heaven forbid, stopped at a red light and you search something in Google for a local business, 70% of the time you're going to make a phone call to that business, Google says. So suddenly we're in a situation where calls, instead of being the ugly stepchild of the marketing call to action world, are now the most common action in certain forms of mobile search. So mobile searchers want to call you. Calling is a very low friction, easy thing for them to do. They just tap their little thumb on the screen and all of a sudden they push call and they're on the phone with you. And it's entirely changed the entire marketing paradigm. It's changed what marketers are trying to do, and it's changed how customers want to interact with you. So it's really changed everything. Now, calls equal revenue. This isn't a bad thing. When we first share these pieces of data with clients and prospects generally, they're kind of frightened. They say, well, gosh, my system's not built for phone calls. We're built to collect form fills, or we're built to collect walk-in traffic. All that's fine. That's great. Those things aren't bad. But calls produce revenue at a rate that no other channel does. So this is according to data from a variety of sources, and it's sort of combining two pieces of data. So data from HubSpot, Marketing Sherpa, Marketo, a lot of the big companies that gather a significant amount of marketing data indicate that about 2% of form fill leads, 2% of form fill leads turn into revenue within the next 6 to 8 months. So that means 97 to 98% of the leads that fill out a form on your site, no matter what that form is, will not turn into revenue in the next 6 to 8 months. Now, how does that compare to phone calls? Phone calls, there's a substantial and significant difference there. Calls, our data shows, data that we have run proprietarily on millions of phone calls across dozens of industries, indicate that about 30% of phone calls turn into revenue within the next 6 months. And most of that actually turns into revenue within the next 1 to 2 months. So you're in a situation in 6 months' time where you could have 10 to 12x the likelihood of closing a deal from a phone call as you would from a form fill. And I'll give you another example of how this works. So we ran an audit last month on all the leads that we generated, thousands of leads that we generated internally at LogMyCalls that came into our system. And the vast majority of those leads, about 90% of those, were form fills. Someone requesting a demo of our product or downloading a white paper or attending a webinar. 90% of those-ish were form fills. Now, here's the interesting thing. 10% of those leads, that means, were phone calls. So a relatively small percentage. So 10% were phone calls, but here's the really interesting thing. 22% of our revenue last month, our new revenue, was resulting from those 10% of our leads. So even though we receive fewer phone calls, they disproportionately produce revenue, and they disproportionately produce large accounts for us. So what that means is phone callers are farther down the funnel. They're more ready to buy. They've done their research. So don't dissuade phone calls. Don't discourage them. Encourage them. Put phone numbers wherever you can to generate as many phone calls as possible, because it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. So let's talk about mobile phone numbers real quick. You can see my section there at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. So how can you generate phone calls in a mobile environment? There's 3 ways that Google has provided, and that mobile's provided, I should say, 2 of which Google's provided. The first is Google Call Extensions. This is a setting within AdWords that allows you to set up call extensions. You can put any phone number, a call tracking number from a provider like LogMyCalls. You can put your local business number, whatever you want, in as a call extension. That makes that number tappable with your little thumb. You can also use a Google pay-per-call platform phone number. So this is a number that Google forces you to use. They then bill you based on, they then bill you whenever that number is tapped. And then you can also put a phone number on your landing pages. So you can actually not put a phone number in the ad itself and have them click through from the ad or from the organic search result, and then have them land on the landing page or on the website and have a tappable phone number there. Any of these 3 methods will produce phone calls. We prefer, obviously, that you use Google Call Extensions or a landing page phone number, because that allows you to get really significant data from the call as opposed to just Google telling you that the call was made, which is important. All right, let's talk about mobile-centric industries. I'll just spend a second on this. What are the industries that calls for which calls are important, and the industries that generate phone calls? Now, these are sort of common sense, right? Local services. If you're going to call an air conditioning company because your air conditioning is broke in the middle of July, you're going to make a phone call. You're not going to fill out a form. Same thing if you've got a leaky toilet and you want a plumber to come. So home services, number 1. Number 2 is automotive. So if you want your car fixed, if you need an oil change, if your brakes are going out, or even if you need a new car, dealerships get a ton of phone calls as well. Tech, we're in tech, we get a lot of phone calls. Travel, finance, restaurants, and then of course last is retail. Last time I shopped for clothes, which was quite a while ago, my wife will tell you, I didn't make a phone call. I just went into the store and probably bought whatever was on sale. All right, so let's talk about call tracking. We mentioned that you can put those phone numbers, those trackable local and toll-free phone numbers in the Google Ads themselves or on your landing pages. The benefit of this is that it allows you to track with absolute precision which ads, which sources, which campaigns, which keywords, which channels are generating phone calls and which aren't. So we have clients all the time who are spending, 80% of their marketing budget doing a certain type of ad. And then they actually start tracking it with call tracking, and they suddenly determine that the place where they're dumping the vast majority of their money isn't generating the vast majority of their phone calls. That allows them to change their marketing mix and change their marketing budget, which is obviously really important. Our message, though, is that call track. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Phil, were you going to say something?
What have you seen data-wise as it compares to mobile? As people are willing to click through from a specific ad or Google search itself versus from a landing page? I mean, is there consideration of, is it better to have them be driven through to a landing page to ultimately call, or are people fairly comfortable to call right off of a Google ad?
I think, well, we've got some data on this, and I've read a significant amount of data on the same subject. So there's a couple of layered answers there, Phil. First answer is, there is an additional benefit if you can get them to come to your landing page, right? You can cookie them and you can retarget to them. So there is that benefit of them coming to your landing page. However, if your goal is to generate a phone call, it is most likely to happen if you actually include the number in the ad. People will trust you if your ad's written well, right? It comes down to ad copy, the most basic thing sometimes. But you're more likely to generate a phone call if the phone number rather is in the ad itself. It just simply removes a step and takes away some friction. So if you're looking for raw phone calls, just number of phone calls, put the number in the ad itself. If you want the added benefit of cookieing them, and maybe you don't care just about, maybe you get 20%, it's about 20% actually is the data we've run, about 20% fewer phone calls if you push them to a landing page as opposed to including the phone number in the ad. So that's the number. If that 20% is not significant enough for you to forego the benefit of cooking them as well, then I say push them to the landing page. But for most companies, I believe that the 20% of phone calls is significant enough that you want to actually include the number in the ad itself. Does that answer the question, Phil?
It does, yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Good question. Just one more last couple explanation slides here. One of the hurdles people have had to generating phone calls is they say, gosh, there hasn't been enough data available about phone calls, so I don't know how to build this data into my overall ROI calculation at the end of the month, right? So when I'm looking at every campaign, it's hard to, when all of your metrics are web-based, to roll in call data because it doesn't compare in terms of depth and complexity. So you're looking at very in-depth data for your web analytics and for your web leads, but maybe you're only gathering really, really surface data for your calls. And so what we've done is we've developed a way that allows you to really dig into the phone calls. We analyze the calls with speech recognition technology, and we're able to pull out things like a lead score from 0 to 100 for every phone call. And what we found, for example, is that if a lead score is over 80, that call will convert about 90% of the time to revenue. If it's between 60 and 80, that call will convert about 40% of the time to revenue. And if it's below 60, it's not a very good lead and it won't convert to revenue very much. Point being, there's a lot of valuable data found in phone calls, and we're now able to gather the depth of data that marketers have had for a long time about web leads on phone calls. I mean, let's face it, you wouldn't accept a web analytics tool that only told you the source of the click and how long the person was on your site. That would be a really substandard web analytics platform. And yet that is what call tracking has been for the last 20 years, is where did the caller come from and how long were they on the phone? That's it. And what we're saying is that's not enough. That wouldn't be enough in the web analytics world. It shouldn't be enough in the call analytics world either. Here's an example of a couple of pieces of data we can gather. What we found after analyzing millions of phone calls is that 29% of the calls across all industries that we analyzed resulted in revenue or a conversion. That's a substantial number. Some industries are going to be much higher than that. Some industries are going to be a fair bit lower than that, but that's across all industries. And then we found in Q1 that 49% of the calls that came into the system were either good leads or great leads. And we determine all this, again, based on speech recognition technology and the words and phrases that are said on the call. So to sum it all up, the last thing I'll say about mobile is this. It's really changed the game in terms of a marketing action that you want someone to take. So it used to be all about form fills, right? It used to be all about getting someone to give you their email address to throw them on an email list and nurture them. And that's still important, don't get me wrong. But callers are ready to buy. Why put someone on an email list when they'll give you money instead? And that's the benefit, that is the huge, incredible blessing of mobile, is the ability to get in touch or to have people who are lower in the funnel get in touch with you in a way that's simple for them and makes more money for you. So okay. I hope that answers the questions. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Oh, absolutely. Phil actually dropped off on us, and so give me 1 second. I'm going to get him back on because I know he's going to want to add a little bit to what we're going through at this point. So give me 1 sec, okay?
You bet. The other thing to add, too, before we close here, Dustin, if I could, while you're getting Phil back on the line, is the benefit of mobile as well is that you get to be in total control of your message. It forces you to really drill down into what's important to you because you have so few words to use in your ad copy, right? Whereas in a desktop environment, maybe you have 30 to 40 words of ad copy. In a mobile environment, you've got 11, 12, 13. So you really have to be specific about what you're trying to accomplish and what you want the user to do. It's not enough just to be vague like it can be in a sort of desktop Google AdWords environment. You have to be specific and you have to be direct. So I hope that helps. Hope the information was useful. If you need any more information, go to logmycalls.com. And a big shout out to Fluid as well. We've worked with them for a few months now, and they just do a great job. So we get some exciting things coming out in the next few weeks, and we're excited to work with them on all of it. So thanks again, Dustin, for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Phil, are you back?
Yep.
Absolutely. McKay, honestly, we really appreciate having you come on and explain this. I think it's a huge gap for companies to find out where those dollars really are coming, and Log My Calls is one of those solutions that bridges that gap. And I just think in general, with the incredible influx of mobile, it's time for marketers to be looking for a solution of that nature. It makes conversations in the boardroom that much easier, and from time to time, marketers need to be able to pat themselves on the back. I don't think that happens enough, and so knowing that something good is coming from your marketing activities is fun for marketers and obviously hugely beneficial for the company themselves. Phil, did you have anything else to add?
No, we would love to hear if there's anyone that has phone calls or anybody that has questions, just on the webinar in regards to some of the things that either McKay spoke on from Log My Calls or from our end on mobile design and consideration of content. We'd love to field those.
And let's see what we have coming in here. So one question we had, I received, is for you, McKay. What kind of implementation process does a program like Log My Calls involve, and how long does it take for a company to sign up and actually get running, and how does this lay on top of a current phone system?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So first question, in terms of implementation, it's really quite simple. So you can get in, you can sign up, and you can start choosing and provisioning phone numbers immediately. So you could literally sign up and have a phone number that's active within our system within 5 to 10 minutes. So we can provide local or toll-free numbers, or if you have local and toll-free numbers now that you want to continue to market with, and our research again shows that most people don't pay attention to the phone numbers they call. They just Google and click on a number. So it doesn't really matter what number you use, yours or ours. We just need to port those into our system. That takes about a week. But we recommend just using the local and toll-frees from us. It's going to save you money, actually, and it's going to allow you to get started much more quickly. In terms of your phone system, we have nothing to do with the phone system. You simply put local and toll-free numbers wherever you want to put them, whatever marketing channels you want to track, and then the call is recorded and routed through our system and then terminates with wherever you want it to terminate. So the person on the phone doesn't know any different, and the phone system requires nothing to be changed at all. So you can then log in and see your data. And then, of course, with the conversation and analysis piece, all those calls are analyzed with our speech recognition engine, and you get to see that data as well. So, yeah, it doesn't impact phone system, and it's really quite simple to set up. Very simple, in fact.
Excellent, thank you. Another question we had come in is, if my site doesn't have a mobile-friendly tag, how can I get it? And that's actually fairly simple. Google, which often doesn't really reveal a lot of the secrets as to how to improve the SEO ranking and whatnot, and just how the algorithm works, Google has been straightforward with this one. And so the answer to the question is there are 4 criteria that you need to meet. And those criteria are that it avoids software that's not common on mobile devices such as Flash. Number 2 is use text that is readable without zooming. 3 is sizes content to the screen so users don't have to scroll horizontally or zoom. And 4, places links far enough apart so that the correct one can be easily tapped. There are a number of mobile-friendly tests, and you can find those links on the Get Fluid blog as well. And so if you are trying to get a mobile-friendly tag, those are the criteria you need to do, and if you need assistance with that, obviously Fluid is always happy to help, whether it's a consultative approach or if we actually can take a look at the site and see how we can help you develop it into becoming mobile-friendly. So one last question we have here is, when it comes to mobile personas, how do you determine the differences? And Phil, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. As far as the differences in mobile personas, just like you develop any sort of audience personas, you want to first identify some of the demographic information. So understanding if your persona is a female, that's a businesswoman, between the ages of 30 to 50. First of all, as you develop a typical persona, you'd want to reach deep into some of the demographic data that's so readily available online or through some basic research companies, but first identifying some of their behaviors and patterns and income level and where they typically will spend their time, and then overlaying on that some of it's intuition to understand and watch and observe how somebody in that nature would, in kind of that demographic range would be using their mobile device. And so you can do a little bit of some observation and even a little bit of some primary research, but there is a wealth of knowledge available that you can simply, as you begin to pinpoint who your personas are, overlay the mobile data with some of the mobile case studies that have been done. And again, there'll be more of this in the next couple of weeks that, as we have an emphasis and focus on mobile, we'll be publishing in regards to how specific audiences, in particularly use mobile. But I think what's important more than anything is to understand whether you're a B2B or B2C type company, thinking about your users, thinking about their interaction with you, and then just working a few different scenarios from desktop and from mobile, and thinking about that entire user experience. And then coupled with the data, it allows you to kind of build a complete persona and then make some intelligent decisions as to how content and web design and conversions ought to be kind of geared and oriented around that group.
Excellent. Well, guys, that is the end of our presentation today. We want to thank everybody for coming. If you have questions, you can find us on Twitter again at GetFluid and at LogMyCalls. Use the hashtag FluidWebinarSeries to make any comments regarding this webinar. And lastly, we will leave you. Today happens to be National Pretzel Day, and so this might be a great opportunity to use your phone and search for your local pretzel shop and maybe give them a call to see what specials they might have going today. Anyway, everybody have a great day, and thanks for joining us.